what is it that we should be working on for 2026 so that when we meet with this audience again, they should maybe be on the lookout for these things?
Yeah, that's the worst question to a product person. You need inspired people to make this happen. You need people who are gonna transform their own organization, and they're thinking about this in a different way. And that's what I've seen on the summit. The manual work that is required to do procurement, or the fragility of the agreements, those are very shared industry problems. And I think the only way to really solve it is to come together and build something meaningful as an industry. And so I think this is what's happening at the summit.
Welcome back to the Freight Debate. My name is Patrik Berglund. I'm founder CEO of Xeneta, and I'm here today with my dear colleague, Fabio. How are you doing, Fabio?
For everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Fabio. I'm Chief Product Officer at Xeneta.
Beautiful. We thought it would make sense to do a summit recap as we were in Barcelona a bit more than a week ago, I believe, Fabio, at the time. Time is flying by. But it was crazy. We had more than 500 people flying in from more than 30 countries to spend time with us and each other and the community. I'm pretty blown away about how far we've gotten since our first summit nine years ago, where we had a small conference room at a hotel in Hamburg with almost as many Xeneta colleagues as we had guests in the room to what we experienced in Barcelona. What was your highlight from Barcelona, Fabio?
Yeah, it was the second one for me. So I was in Amsterdam last year, and this was the second one. And I can see that every year for me, the summit is like going back to some old friends and talking about what we care the most and our daily job. And so what's always impressive for me is the quality of the people that are joining us. And it starts to be from all angle of the industry, right? We had carriers, we had forwarders, we had many shippers, but above all, we had a lot of decision makers and people who are moving cargo and are making daily decisions around procurement. So conversations are very deep. And as a product guy, I love it, right? I get so many new ideas and thoughts and way of thinking. And so it's very energizing for me and for the whole product team.
Maybe I agree with that, and I think to me personally, it's all the feedback we're getting, positive as well as those who's challenging us, that I find incredibly valuable, and that is also the personal connection. Seeing people again and again, year after year, and seeing the community grow is incredibly inspiring to me. But if I were to structure, let's say, the summit into maybe 3 categories for me, I would say thought leadership on one side, product on the other side, and maybe the third pillar would be about sort of the future. Maybe that is connected to thought leadership, but something about the future and the outlook of the market from an industry point of view. So more than thought leadership, I think maybe this is combining the industry knowledge with the perspective of what is coming ahead. And I think those 3 elements maybe covers broadly what was brought up in the summit. Or do you think I'm missing anything?
I'll give you another one. For me, community is super important, right?
Yeah.
And we see there's so much value from different shippers or different carriers or providers talking to each other and learning that maybe you're not the only one experiencing certain problems. And that's also what I observe. Like, if you look at the manual work that is required to do procurement, or the fragility of the agreements, those are very shared industry problems. And I think the only way to really solve it is to come together and build something meaningful as an industry. And so I think this is what's happening at the summit. And it's very exciting when I see different shippers talking to each other about our product or the market. I think those are the conversations that can really move the needle.
Okay, let's hone in on some of the product stuff, because I mean, that excites me a lot personally, and I think we've made some phenomenal steps over the past 12 and 24 months in particular. Where do you want to start, Fabio? Which part of our product do you want to start with? Different data sets or different functionality?
Yeah, maybe let's start from some of our data, right? And
Yeah.
I can give some numbers as they're fresh in my memory. But we have an all-time high number of data points. We surpassed 700 million rates data points in our system, which is incredible. And but we also learned in the last couple of years, and maybe since COVID and the market started to shift, that rates are not the only factor. And so something that is very exciting for me is the EEC acquisition that we made back in August. Because thanks to EEC, now we have access to liner schedule data. We have over 2,000 different schedules in our platform. And then we overlay on top of it real-time vessel positioning for all the vessels in the world. And so we get arrival time and dates at every single port. And we can build a lot of interesting data for that. So at the summit, we announced two new data sets. One that is destination delays, that shows you the difference between estimated time of arrival at destination and what actually happens. And the other one is cancellation rates, where we look at blank sailings plus scheduled port omissions, when the vessel skips the port. And we provide an information carrier by carrier or service by service or by alliance on those two data sets. So that's super exciting, and it combines very well with rates, right? When you are a procurement manager and you make a procurement decision, it's never just about cost. You have to think about the service that you get as well.
Dive into this a little bit more, because one of my concerns, and I know we've been debating this, as we just keep on bolting on additional data sets, the complexity increases as well. So going from sort of a rate view or price or cost view to a multidimensional view, like you described, provides a lot more complexity, or you need to navigate a lot more complexity. Can you talk a little bit from a product angle? How do we solve that to make it easy for the user to actually extract the insights that they want to get from that data?
Yeah, I think that's where AI comes into play. And at the summit, we released our first AI agentic product, where essentially we do all of this for our customers. We look at across all the different data sets and the one that we mentioned, but also, transit time, schedule reliability, capacity, peer comparison, maybe market rate outlook with a forecast. It's very hard today for customers to navigate all these different interfaces and figure out what to do. And so we think AI can help a lot. And we have agents running in the background, gathering data, comparing data with the market, analyzing and identifying opportunities. And then once you figure out an opportunity, what are you going to do about it? What's the next step? And what can I do about it based on my rates, the lanes that I care about? What should I do today? Those are some of the questions that we try to answer with AI agent. And the good part about agent is that it doesn't really care about each individual analysis, right? You can just tell the agent, this is what I want to achieve. I want to improve my spend, or I want to improve my carrier supplier mix. And then it's going to go do the research and create the best recommendations for you. So that's one way. The other way, I think I've heard maybe over the last 18 months at Xeneta, I've heard many times that carriers' data is somewhat biased, right? If you are a shipper and you sit down for a QBR, carriers are always going to tell you they are the fastest, the more reliable, the cheapest. But this data is always coming from the carrier. So it's like when I go at the restaurant with my wife and I read the reviews and the restaurant write their own reviews.
Yeah.
It's very biased. And so with the other product that I'm excited about that we unveiled at the summit is Carrier Scorecard. And with Carrier Scorecard, you can search for a port pair or a region. You can select which metrics are important for you. So across all the data sets that we have, you can say, I care about transit time more than I care about rates. Or you can select a template. So we have a cost-focused template, a schedule reliability template. You select what matters to you, and then we create dynamically a real-time scorecard comparing all the different carriers. And I think that's very powerful because we are acting as an unbiased, neutral third party where we just surface information and then we allow you to make the best decision.
I'm excited about that product as well, and it's one of my favorite products to actually play with already. So I've been using it in several of my conversations, whether it's with existing customers or prospects. But let's talk a little bit about product, because when we were in Barcelona, similar to last year, we said that we're here to change how freight is bought and sold, right? And it's a journey, and I think on the journey so far, we built a good product, tons of data, And now we're sort of tying it together, and we want to make a bigger shift, I believe, with sort of how companies are running the RFQs, whether you optimize that process, whether you move into an index model or whether you buy futures. To me, it's like different stages of evolution that this industry will go through, and it's a matter of how fast or slow it will go. But at some point, to me, it's inevitable that this is going to happen. Now, as a part of this, and I know this is sort of going straight into the details, but as a part of this, I've been very excited about our rate management release. And can you explain why an integrated rate management system would be important in this sort of evolution of the industry?
Yeah, of course. And it brings me back to the time when I was procuring at the, I worked at MSC for over a decade, and so I've seen so many different rate sheets, and I've seen very long processes moving data from one format to the next one and change it again. So I think it's a very manual process, and it's a process where, as an industry, it's very it lacks standardization. So every format is different, every carrier does it in a different way, and so I think we can help there. And I think we can help there because in Xeneta, for many years, we built technology to process rate sheets.
Yeah.
So we became actually really good at processing different formats and identify what we think is the best format and standard for the industry. And also, when you think about indexing, like you mentioned, if we start to use Xeneta for indexing, would it make sense to connect directly to your rate repository so that you have always the most up-to-date information that your finance team can use or that your booking teams can use? So that's why we decided to essentially externalize some of the product that we had already internally for our rate management team. And that's how integrated rate management came about. So we want our shippers customer to be able to handle all their rates and to manage their rates directly in Xeneta, which means you're going to be able to search for a port pair in the same way that you search for benchmarks today. And you're going to be able to see all your available contracts between the two ports and all your rates with other carriers. And for each rate, we want to provide some historical view, which we call it audit log, where we show over time, how's your rate composition changing, right? Maybe some documentation fees are increasing. Maybe some origin charges or inland charges are also changing. So we want to capture every possible rate information that we have, and then we want to show you how it changed over time. And when you do an indexing with us, we want to get to the point where we can automate the communication between your indexing formulas and simulation and the rate management. Huh. I'm also very excited. There's so much work to do, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And we know that many of our customers are finding it useful. So we are already running some early adopter program, and it's a very exciting step for us.
Yeah, I think whenever I think about a lot of the sort of processes that is actually running in this industry, a lot of the knock-on effects from poor quality data in the beginning creates a lot of cost and waste. And I think not only do I look at sort of the buying and selling process as a bit wasteful, but if you look at freight audit and payment, for instance, that's an industry that has evolved and grown primarily because the data in is so shitty and weak that it creates these problems later on in the sort of supply chain. So I think Xeneta has a role to play here where we can help the industry clean up a lot of the data and then find a lot of value also later on in sort of the process of moving cargo or paying for cargo.
But yeah. An interesting insight at the summit, right? We always thought that indexing is going to make it more difficult to do invoicing because you keep changing the rates maybe every quarter. But we actually spoke with shippers and carriers alike that they say it simplifies a lot. Because a lot of surcharges are built into the indexing. So you don't need to worry about every carrier calling a surcharge in a different way. It actually simplifies a lot, and we see better invoicing accuracy with indexing than without.
It's a lot of product, Fabio, and I know we could spend hours on this, but you're hosting, I believe, on November 6th, a webinar as well. So urge everyone who wants to really dive deep to sign up for that one to see the things in action. But is there anything missing from Barcelona in terms of what we announced on the product side?
Maybe because we mentioned a bit indexing, maybe I just want to share that we also took a next step in our indexing product, which is, in March, we launched our indexing simulator, where if you're thinking about indexing or you're planning with your suppliers, you can go in Xeneta and you can simulate different formulas and see the comparison between your tendering process and indexing. But at the summit, we also announced the next level of this product, which is we want to help you manage and execute the indexing contract. So once you agree on a certain formula with your supplier, we store the information on the formula and we run the calculations for you. We provide a good way for you to audit all this calculation and to see what data was used and to go back and see what rules were triggered at any point. But we are helping also to remove all this execution burden when you decide to do indexation.
I want to change a little bit because, I mean, we had sessions on stage on topics like resilience or how to manage the volatility in the market and disruptions. We went deep into sort of the 2026 outlook that we're providing for both air and ocean. There was a whole host of various sessions. There was high-level macro events and all the way down to the nitty-gritty details where we're looking at how did the different carriers price themselves in the market so far this year versus the forwarders. Is there any highlights from, whether it's the market outlook or any of these other sessions from you, Fabio, that you would like to mention and bring forward?
Yeah, I enjoyed our initial 2025 recap session where we look back at 2025 and what happened so far. And many thought it was going to be a easy, stable year, and it didn't turn out to be that way. So that was a very insightful session, I would say. I also loved a lot. We had a session on resilience with our own Emily, and that was a very. It's amazing, right? And we draw a lot of comparison just for the audience. Maybe we talked about Emily, swimming the Lake Geneva for 28 hours in a row. And there's so many similarities with what we're trying to do, right? In terms of an industry and the resilience that you need to be a procurement manager today versus what Emily did. So that session was incredible for me.
Yeah, that was one of my absolute highlights as well. Geodis Wilson on stage together with Emily talking about resilience from two very different experiences, whether it's our industry or preparing for a 72-kilometer swim. And so that was super cool. Also made me very impressed and proud to be a colleague of somebody who can actually muster through that. What about a small teaser for what's coming next, Fabio? I mean, we talk a lot of product, and it seems to almost be endless in terms of what we can build and expand on. But do you want to share some thoughts? Maybe not without even committing to what we're going to build. But if I challenged you to say, what is it that we should be working on for 2026, so that when we meet with this audience again, they should maybe be on the lookout for these things?
Yeah, that's the worst question to a product person, because you're going to hold me accountable for whatever I say. But I think there's still so much work to do around making it as easy as possible to get to insights and taking the insights a step forward to actions. We have what I believe to be the best quality and highest value data sets in this industry, right? We have long-term rates, short-term rates. We have now all the performance information for carriers, schedule reliability, but it's a lot of data, and making sense of it is still very difficult. So I think there's much more work that we need to do around simplifying a lot the experience, figuring out what are the insights that are worth executing and that I can execute, and then how do we make that faster, better, cheaper for our customers. So I think that would be my number one area where I would focus. But also there's so much more data that is relevant during procurement that we want to surface to our customer, right? Because if I think about Xeneta and the summit as well, the only reason why we're here is because of the community that you've been able to build and we've been able to build. And so first of all, thank you to all our shippers that are sharing, with us, and they're part of the journey. But also, how can we provide even more value by surfacing community-driven insights? Like, would it be helpful to know what your colleagues are doing? And those conversations that happen in the hallway at the summit, how can we do it in the product throughout the year at scale for everybody? I think that's something that is top of mind for us.
Yeah, I love that. I always thought that we have, even 5-6 years ago, a phenomenal community with people who's really, I don't know, dedicated to what we're trying to build. And I love that they're challenging us and pushing us forward. But I believe it's particularly important in this industry because it's an industry with some high degree of inertia, and there's not a lot of things has been running and humming for decades the same way. So finding those who want to push and see innovation happen and team up with them is incredibly inspiring. So I'm equally grateful as you are, Fabio. To be honest, it's fantastic, and that's also why I appreciate that they take time off from incredibly busy schedules to fly in and meet with us. Now, on that note, this is the first time in the history of Xeneta when we announced the next year's summit at the summit, right? Which means that we have every year spent a few months to pull together the summit. Next year, we're going to go big because it's our 10th edition, and we're going to be inviting everyone to join us in Munich on November 4 and 5, 4th, 5th, yeah. And nothing would please me more than we can make, the 10th summit with 1,000 participants flying in from all over the world. So that's, I think, is pretty ambitious. And we hope that the listeners and viewers checking out this podcast will check out the opportunity to join us in Munich. Now, if you want to capture the 2025 summit in one word, Fabio, what would that be?
For me, it was inspiring. And if I think about what we are trying to do, but not Xeneta, right? But what we're trying to do with all our community of customers, we're trying to do something really hard, which is to change how we buy and sell freight. Yeah. And so I think you need inspired people to make this happen. You need people who are going to transform their own organization, and they're thinking about this in a different way. And that's what I've seen on the summit.
I want to actually then wrap up with one of my personal highlights, Fabio, from this year's summit. We had a customer on stage who he was asked something about Xeneta, and he actually said, he responded to the questions, partially addressing, I don't know, product value, something like that. But then he said, but what his team appreciates the most is the fact that on a daily basis, they interact with carriers and forwarders, trying to solve a lot of challenges that he said quite often is energy draining. Whereas when they work with Xeneta, and that's also problems and challenges, don't get me wrong, but he said it was energizing. And to me, when he said that, I became incredibly proud of our people, because every day is what we do and how we interact and come across that is creating that vibrant community sort of or feeling and healthy collaboration. And to me, I think that stood out as probably the top, the most appreciated experience for me.
Absolutely agree. And I think also there's so many people who work very hard to make this summit happen. Yeah. And so we are extremely thankful for all the work, behind the curtains and for us to be able to be a summit and showcase all the good work.
So in 2026, Munich, we're going to raise the bar again, and we hope that you out there can help us do that. Thank you for joining today, Fabio. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.